We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Amud Aleph and Mesechet Kesuvos. This is Kesuvos Daf 105a. The Mishnah continues that Hanan says, let's say you have a situation of a husband that goes on a faraway trip, so Tishava Basof, Velo Tishava Batchila. So the wife should swear, she should take an oath at the end and not at the beginning. Rashi over here says, Tishava Basof Keshiyishmu Bo Shemes, meaning when they hear that he actually died on this journey, V'tovu Ligvos Ksubas, and now she's coming to collect her Ksuba, Tishava Shelo Ikva Biyada Mishal Bala Klum. So she has to take an oath that she doesn't have in her possession anything from the husband already, and that's how she's able to collect the Ksuba. V'lo Tishava Batchila, and Hanan says she shouldn't take an oath at the beginning, meaning B'shas Giboy Mizonos, when she's collecting Mizonos, when he first leaves on the trip and she wants to collect the Mizonos, then she does not take an oath according to Hanan. And the Mishnah continues, Nechliku olav b'nei Kohanim Gedolim, the sons of the Kohanim Gedolim, they argued on Hanan, V'amru, and they said, Tishava batchila uvasov, she should take a shvu in the beginning and at the end. Amar Rabbi Dosa ben Horkanis says, Kedivreihem, like their words, meaning to say, Rabbi Dosa ben Horkanis agrees with the b'nei Kohanim Gedolim. And the Mishnah continues, Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, Yafa Amar Hanan, what Hanan said is actually correct, Lo Tishava Ela Basof, she should only take a shvua at the end. And the Gemara says, Uramini, we have a contradiction to our Mishnah from the following Brisa, Shlosha Dayone Gezelos Hayu Yerushalayim, there were three judges of thefts in Yerushalayim, Admon ben Gadoy, V'Chanan HaMitzri, V'Chanan ben Avishalom, and the three are Admon ben Gadoy, Chanan HaMitzri, and Chanan ben Avishalom. And so the Gemara asks, Kasha Tulasa Train. Number one, we have a difficulty because in our Mishnah it says there were two judges, and here in this Brisa it says there were three. And furthermore, Kasha Gezeros Agezelos. In our Mishnah it calls them Dayone Gezeros, these are judges who issue decrees. But in this Brisa it calls them Dayone Gezelos, which are judges that have to do with theft. So we have a double contradiction between the Mishnah and the Brisa. And the Gemara answers, B'shalama tlos atrein lo kasha. It makes sense to say the 3 against 2, that's not difficult. T'chashiv le katani, d'lo chashiv lo katani. The dayanim that the Mishnah considers important, those are listed. The ones that the Mishnah does not consider important are not listed. And so that's why in our Mishnah, they only consider 2 of the judges to be important, so only 2 are listed. But really there are 3, as the Brisa says. Ela gezeros ha-gezelos kasha, but we still have a contradiction in terms of whether they're called Dayone Gezeros or Dayone Gezelos. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Shayu gozun Gezeros al Gezelos. The idea over here is that they would make decree that were relevant to Gezela, that were relevant to thievery. Kedetanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Kitman Netiya, let's say an animal severs a plant, damages a plant of someone else. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Gozrei Gezeros should be Yerushalayim Omrim. Rabbi Yossi says that those who make decrees in Yerushalayim, they say, Netiya bas shenasa shtei kesef. If it's something that was planted, it's a year old, so then it's 2 kesef. Bas shtei shanim, if it's 2 years old, so then arba kesef, then it's 4 kesef. So you see the idea, this is a gezerah that is relevant to a situation of theft, or in this case damage, the same basic idea. And the Gemara continues, Uramini, we have the following contradiction, Shlosha Dayane Gezeros Hayu b'Yerushalayim, there were 3 Dayane Gezeros in Yerushalayim, Admon v'Chanan v'Nacham. So here it mentions Admon and Chanan, but it also mentions Nacham, and Nacham is a new name that we haven't seen before. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Papa says, Man Tana Nacham, who is this Tana that lists Nacham as one of the Dayane Gezeros? Rabbi Nosson here. It's actually Rabbi Nosson. He had Nacham as one of the Dayanim. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Nosson says, Af Nacham Hamadi, Migozrei Gezeros should be Yerushalayim Hoya. Even Nacham Hamadi, he was one of the Gozrei Gezeros, one of the judges who issued decrees in Yerushalayim. V'lohodu lo Chachamim, but the Chachamim did not agree to what Rabbi Nosson said. And the Gemara continues, V'su leka, but were there no other judges in Yerushalayim? V'amar Rabbi Pinchas, Amar Rabbi Oshia, but Rabbi Pinchas said, Shlosh meyos v'tishim v'arba batei dinim hayu b'Yerushalayim. There were 394 courts. This is talking about the courts of 23 judges in Yerushalayim. Kenegdon batei chenasios, there were a comparable number of shuls. Uchenegdon batei midrashos, and there were a comparable number of batei medrash. Uchenegdon batei sofrim, and there were a comparable number of schools for children. And so therefore you see there were many more judges than just the 2 or the 3. And the Gemara answers, Dayonin Tuvahava, there were many judges. But when we're listing the 2 or 3 judges, we're talking about specifically about judges who issued decrees. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Asi. Rav Yehuda says, the Rav Asi says, Gozrei Gezeiros should be Yerushalayim, Hayunotlin Secharan Tishim V'Teisha Mona Mitrumas Halishka. Those who would issue decrees in Yerushalayim, they would take their wages 99 Mona from the Trumas Halishka. that was the storage of money in the Beis HaMikdash. Lo ratzon, if they didn't want mosifan lehem, then we would add, we would pay them even more. And the Gemara says, lo ratzon, what do you mean if they didn't want? If they wanted higher wages? Atu b'Rashi asking, are we talking about wicked people who just demand higher wages when they don't even need it? Ela lo safku, rather what it means is if this amount was insufficient. Afal pisha lo ratzon, even though they didn't want more, mosifan alei, and we would give them more, we would add on to their wages to make sure that it was a sufficient amount. And the Gemara continues, Karna have a shakel istira mizakoi ve'istira mechayev. Karna, when he would judge a case, he would take an istira from the innocent one, and he would take an istira from the guilty one, meaning to say he would have each party pay him one istira, which was a small amount, ve'doin l'hudina, and then he would judge their case. The Gemara says, V'hechi avid hachi, how could he do this? V'aksiba, doesn't the pasuk say, V'shochad lo sikach, you're not supposed to take a bribe. So if he's taking money from the litigants, isn't that the same thing as taking bribery? Now maybe you'll suggest that's only if you're not taking money from both parties. Because then you might come to favor the din. You're going to give the judgment to one side, the side that gave you the bribe. But Karna came in the shakal mitarvayo. Maybe you'll say that Karna, since he took from both litigants, from both parties, lo asilat sluyedina, so he's not going to corrupt the judgment. But the Gemara says that's not true. Even in a situation where you're not going to come to corrupt the judgment, is it permitted? But the Brisa says, you can't take bribes. What does the pasuk mean? If the pasuk means to say that you can't make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent, that the pasuk already says. It says lo satem mishpat, you can't turn the judgment. You have to judge fairly. Rather, the pasuk means even if you're going to make the innocent person innocent and the guilty person guilty, amra Torah v'shochad lo sikach, still the Torah says you can't take bribes. And so the Gemara says, Hani mili heichad shakal b'torah shochad. It's only a problem if you take the bribe, if you take it as a bribe. But Karna b'torah igra hab'shakal, but Karna took it as wages, and therefore that's fine. The Gemara says, Uvetorah sigra mishari, but is it really permitted to take it as wages? But we learned in a Mishnah, Hanotel schar lodon, let's say a person takes wages to judge a case, dinov b'teilin, then his judgment is going to be considered nullified, so you can't take wages to judge a case. And so the Gemara answers, Hani mili agar dina. That's only true if you're taking the wages as a judge. But Karna agar b'teila have a shakal. But Karna would actually take wages for the fact that he couldn't work his other job, for the fact that he was batel, that he wasn't able to do the other job. That you're allowed to take. But the Gemara says, Va'agar b'teila mishari. Is it really permitted to take wages for the fact that you are batel, that you're not working? V'atanya, but we learned in a brayso mechower hadayan shenotel schar lodon, that it's ugly for a dayan to take wages to judge. Elo shedino din, but it is considered a good judgment. The judgment is going to be considered valid. And so the Gemara says, Hey Chidami, now what's the case in this brisa? Ilema agar din, if you're going to say that we're talking about wages for the actual judgment, dino din, the brisa is saying that that's considered a valid judgment. Vatanya, but we learned in a brisa, hanotel schar lodin dina betelim, on the contrary, if somebody takes wages to judge, then the judgment is not valid. So ella agar betela, so obviously this brisa is talking about agar betela, it's talking about the wages for the fact that the person is batel from working the other job. V'katani mechower hadayin, and still it says that the judge is ugly for taking these kind of wages. So this can't be what Karna was doing either. And so the Gemara says, Hani mili betela de lo mukha. When we say you're not supposed to take agar betela, that's only if you're if you're not able to work, and it's something that's not clear. People don't realize that you're giving up the other wages. But Karna betela de mukha have it. But Karna, everybody knew that he was giving up other work, that he was sitting batel from his other job. Have a shakal, again, it was betela mukha. It was clear that he was taking the schar bittel. To have it toy ba'ambura de chamra, because what he used to do is he used to inspect the areas where they used to store the wine. And they used to give him a zuz, so everybody knew that he was losing out on that zuz, and so he took that as his wage for being the judge. And the Gemara continues, Ki had Rav Huna, it's like the case with Rav Huna, Ki aviyasi dina lekamei, when a judgment would come in front of him, Amar lahu, he would say to them, Havuli gavra de doli li b'charikoi, go find someone else who can draw the water instead of me, someone else to work my job instead of me, v'idon lechudina, and then I'll judge the case for you. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Avoh says, Bo re'ei kamus semuyo seineyen shal mekable shochad, come and see how much the acceptance of bribes, how much it can blind a person. Adam chash be'einav, let's say a person is sick in his eyes, he has a disease in his eyes, no sin maman l'rofe, he gives money to the doctor, safek misrape, safek eina misrape, there's a doubt if he'll be healed, there's a doubt maybe he won't be healed. Ve'hein notlin shava pruta, but here you have these cases of judges, they take just a pruta, u'misamin einei, and that causes their eyes to go blind. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, ki hashochad ya'aver pichim, that the shochad, the bribery, it blinds those who are able to see. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ki hashochad yavrei nechachomim, it says the bribery blinds the eyes of the wise, kal v'chomer l'tipshin, and certainly it will blind those who are foolish. V'yasalef divrei tzadikim, and it takes the words of the righteous and it twists those words, it makes them corrupt, kal v'chomer l'rishoim, and that's all the more so for the rishoim, that it's going to corrupt their judgments. And the Gemara says, Midi tipshim u'rishoim b'nei dinaninu, does this even make sense? Are tipshim fools and rishoim wicked people, are they even able to act as judges in court? What does this brayso mean? Elahachi kamar, so the Gemara says, rather, this is what it means to say, Ki hashochad yavrei nechachomim, what it means to say is, bribery can blind the eyes of the wise, afilu chacham gadol, even if a person is very wise, v'lokeach shochad, and he takes a bribe, eino nifter min ha'olam below samyas halev, he won't leave the world without having a blindness of the heart, v'yasalef divrei tzadikim, and it twists the words of the tzadikim, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Hey Amud Beis.